We are all set.
Okay, good morning all. Damian Meyer, I'm the chairperson this year for the Citizens Clean Election Commission. And we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, which is the first item on our agenda. It's 9:30 a.m. March 24, 2022. I'd like to ask that audience members keep their microphones on mute, please. And with that, I'll take attendance for my fellow commissioners. Please identify yourselves for the record.
This is
Commissioner Kimball is here.
Commissioner Chan is here too.
Commissioner Titler here.
All right, we have all 5 commissioners here, which is always a good thing. So good morning to all. And then I'll move on to agenda item 2, which is discussion and possible action on commission's minutes for February 24, 2022. Is there any discussion on the minutes? And if not, do I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Chan. Is there a second?
Yeah, I second. Commissioner Titler.
Thank you, Commissioner Titler. All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Let's go ahead and call the roll. Commissioner Chan,
I vote aye.
Commissioner Kimball,
Aye.
Commissioner Payton,
Aye.
Commissioner Titler,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. So the motion carries 5-0, approving the minutes for the February 2022 meeting. And then we'll go to the third agenda item, which is discussion and possible action on executive director's report, enforcement and regulatory updates and legislative updates. Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you to discuss the report, and then we'll entertain questions from the commissioners.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I wanted to preview just real, we'll have Patti Hansen, who's the Coconino County Recorder, joining us today and on the next agenda item. So I'm going to move through this relatively quickly to try to get to that. I think a couple of highlights. The next local election is on May 17th with early voting beginning on April 20th. The candidate filing period began and
Tom, we lost your audio.
Yeah.
Tom, can you hear us?
if people can't hear me, I'm going to need someone to tell me.
Tom, we can't hear you.
Okay. I don't know what to do with my audio situation. So I will say candidate debates are starting. You can see the report. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I won't belabor this with my audio issues.
Is there a debate actually scheduled for the 19th of April? Or is that just when they are eligible to begin being scheduled?
No, they will begin at that time. The schedule has already been put together. Like I said, well, you didn't hear it, obviously. The goal is to get to a place where we can get them all done before early voting begins, because we think that's the way to maximize the utility of the process. If Gina's there, she could probably answer more questions about debates than I can, and probably doesn't have the audio issues.
Your audio has actually been good the last minute or two, so.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I just want to say I appreciate that goal, and hopefully that's able to be done, that it's complete before early voting. I know personally, I actually consulted our debates when I was voting in different races if I wasn't familiar with the candidates. So I found it super helpful as a voter.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chan. Any other comments or questions from the other commissioners? And then, Tom, anything more to add on the executive director report.
You know, I hang on. That again, I mean, I think, you know, I think there's I mean, I think among the major issues, there is a case at the Arizona Supreme Court now involving whether or not to get rid of vote by mail. We don't know when that will be ruled on. We were, I guess, pleased to see that one of the amicus groups was incorporated some of the substance of our voter education efforts to try to explain how the timing of this lawsuit, in addition to the merits, is particularly problematic. And, you know, obviously that vote by mail balloting is something that voters in Arizona rely upon in the vast majority of voters do. I think the other issue that I think is worth highlighting is that the state Senate subpoenaed additional records from the Maricopa County Elections Department or Recorder's Office this week. I guess directly to the Board of Supervisors, but it related to a report that came out of their audit relating or their review that had to do with whether or not signatures are being properly matched by folks who are reviewing those early voting envelope affidavits. So as you all know, when you submit your mail ballot, you put the ballot in an envelope, you sign that envelope stating, you know, essentially affirming who you are. That envelope is an affidavit. The signatures are compared on that to the signatures on file with the county recorder or through the state voter registration database. There was the Senate had a review conducted by a contractor who looked at those signatures, looked at a sample of those signatures and compared them initially to commercially available or publicly available signatures of, in theory, the same people. Election experts are very skeptical of this mode of review, in part because
We lost you, Tom. Tom, we lost your audio there. Election experts are skeptical of this review. I heard that.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch any of that.
You're back. I said the last thing I heard you say was election experts are skeptical of this type of review.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, they're not. The review didn't compare the signatures on file with the county. They compared the signatures to public databases.
So we're losing Tom's audio again. Mike, Gina, are you able to pick up on that at all with where he's at on that, or do we just want to move on?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I believe Tom caught most of it. Basically, there was Maricopa County in the report. They basically what Tom was saying is that when the third-party review did the signature analysis, they looked at these publicly available signatures as opposed to the voter signatures that are already on file. So when the counties are doing their signature review, they're looking at all the signatures that they have on file for the voters registration record. And then, so there obviously could be concerns and issues with doing a signature comparison and analysis to publicly available signatures, you know, and the accuracy and authenticity of doing so. So that, I believe, pretty much sums up what Tom was trying to communicate.
Okay. Anything more on the executive director report? I know there's 27 pages of, very small print here of bills that are currently in the House or Senate floor that could impact or relate to voting. Is there any anyone that wants to highlight any of those or that we need to be concerned about at this time? I know Commissioner Kimball usually weighs in a few of those, but any of staff have any particular ones that they think we should be aware of?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, there are a couple of bills that were supposedly dead prior. Mr. Fillmore has a bill. It has become a strike everything. Senator Kelly Townsend has taken up the mantle. This is the bill that pretty much guts mail-in balloting. It requires all votes to be counted within 24 hours. It's an interesting bill, to say the least. From what I've heard, it got out of committee, but from what I've heard, it's not going to make it out of the Senate. There's still several Republicans that have said they don't like it, they won't vote for it. So we'll see. But it was killed at one point on the floor of the Senate, and it's now come back. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But from what I've heard from different people down there, it doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Carlson.
and I apologize for interrupting, but since it's not the executive director who's speaking on this issue right now, perhaps this discussion would be better had under agenda item 6, discussion and possible action on 2020 legislative bills on the topics of elections, voting, and administration. Obviously, if you want to, move on to that item or move that up, I just want to be clear, who's speaking about what and what point we're addressing.
Okay. Okay. Tom, I don't know if you want to give us a go. Is there anything else in the executive director's report that you'd like to convey to us that we haven't discussed? I see we have the continued great work that Avery and Gina are doing on voter education. And of course, we have Commissioner Chan has joined the Secretary of State's office as her general counsel. Commissioner Chan, can I ask you to just tell us a little bit about your new role with the Secretary's office, and of course, congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just started Monday, and it's nice to be working outside the home again and kind of getting back into the saddle legally. So the job entails, giving legal advice to the agency, and because of the kind of distinct decoupling of the Secretary's office from the AG's office, I'm going to be representing them in giving advice, things that the AG's office would normally do. So a lot of public records requests, like any agency. We have multiple divisions here, including the library, which has its own boards and commissions, and they need legal advice. We have, of course, elections is one. So when a candidate challenges come up, the Secretary's office normally just is there nominally. So I'll be handling those. The Business Services Division handles notary and UCC, and the main thing is any notary complaints and administrative proceedings that those entail. So that's kind of a high-level overview, and I'm just really excited to be back at work. Actually, it's kind of the perfect fit for me right now and what they needed. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity. So.
Okay. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
We're excited for you and the opportunity. Tom, the other issue on here that I want to ask you about is the equal issue and taking that offline. Do we need to have any further discussion on that at this point in time?
I'm going to take a shot at this, Mr. Chairman. We have an agenda item about that. If it's okay with everyone, I'm happy to pre-termit that with this comment. It went offline. We have not, to the best of my knowledge, heard any complaints from candidates here at Clean Elections. As I said to the Cap Times this week, my hope is that this turns out not to be a big deal. Obviously, the secretary has started to push back aggressively against candidates who complain, asking them, did you receive our communications on this and that kind of thing, which, of course, that they have been communicating since they decided to start communicating about the issue. So my hope is that folks have the notice that they should have had and have been able to accommodate the issue. That said, the Attorney General's office had posted a request for complaints. I don't know if they've received any, and I don't know and I do know that, the best of my knowledge, the lawsuit between the Secretary's office and the Attorney General's office remains ongoing. So that is my update on that, Mr. Chairman, if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions on the Executive Director's report. Do any of the other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, then I apologize for jumping ahead here a little bit. The next item on our agenda is item number 4. And this is a discussion and possible action on election voting administration issues, including funding and policy with Coconino County Recorder Patti Hansen. Commissioners, last month, we heard from Cochise County Election Director Lisa Mara. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by Coconino County Recorder Patti Hansen. We asked Patti to be here today to discuss challenges facing election officials, especially around resources, which she has been engaged with at the state and federal level for many years. Patti began her election administration career in 1987 when she was appointed to be the Deputy Election Commissioner for Lancaster County, Nebraska. She served in a variety of election posts in Nebraska and Minnesota, including Elections Administrator for the Minnesota Secretary of State's office. She became the Elections Administrator for Coconino County, Arizona in 2003. And she was first elected to Coconino County Recorder in 2012 and has held leadership roles in numerous state and national election organizations. So on behalf of all the commissioners, I want to welcome Ms. Hansen. And as an opening question, I wanted to ask her, based on your experience, how significant are the resource challenges in Arizona elections today?
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Meyer, and thank you, your fellow commissioners, for letting me come today and visit with you. There's many challenges facing elections administration at the moment, but I think I want to concentrate on the financial challenges. As you heard, I've been doing this for a long time. And in fact, April 1st, it will be 35 years I've been involved in election administration. And I know I look way too young to have done it that long, but no, just joking. But during that time, I had never had enough money to do everything that I felt needed to be done to really have a very successful election and reach out to the people in our county. But what happened in 2020 was the Center for Technology and Civic Life gave us a $614,000 grant. And that grant, I think, helped us not only have a successful election, we broke all sorts of records in regards to number of people who registered to vote and voter turnout. And we did all of this by keeping everything safe and secure. And I just want to give you an idea of what we spent the money on. We were able to do install ballot drop boxes throughout the county. As you're probably aware, Coconino County is geographically quite large. Land size, we're larger than, I think it's 7 US states. So that's one of the challenges we faced. And what we did is we were able to expand the number of ballot drop boxes from 2 that we've had for way over 30 years in Flagstaff to 16 other locations throughout the county. And those drop boxes resulted in 45% of our early voters returned their vote in early ballot through those drop boxes. Now, one of the things with drop boxes, the box itself is not the only expense. We need to hire people to go out there on a regular basis every day or every other day in teams of 2, opposite political party, to retrieve those early ballots. So we hired many temporary employees with the funds given to us through the CTCL grant. We used it for motor pool charges, because to drive around this county, it takes a lot of gasoline and you need vehicles. We were able to give our poll workers what we called hazard pay, I guess is the best way to put it. We were having trouble recruiting poll workers because of the pandemic. So we were able to increase our poll worker pay from $120 by another $100. And that may seem like a big increase, but when you consider they're starting usually at 5 a.m. and going until 9 p.m., that's not an unreasonable amount of money to pay them for their work. We also used it for temporary employees on the Navajo Nation because we did not want to put drop boxes on the Navajo Nation because we were really concerned with the increase in early voting that many of the Navajo voters had not been voting by mail. And we wanted to make sure that they were able to have any necessary language assistance and also to check that ballot affidavit envelope that Tom mentioned earlier in his talk was actually signed, because if it's not signed, we can't count the ballot. We increased security. We were able to, the security at our Tuba City office. We have a Flagstaff satellite office at the Flagstaff Mall. Our office was closed to the public because of COVID, because we did not have a large area for people to be able to spread out and vote safely. So we had an office at the Flagstaff Mall. We purchased additional equipment such as laptops and our electronic poll books. And one thing I think that really helped a lot was we ran radio ads and newspaper ads that were specific to the area, advertising where these drop boxes were and other information. And for the first time since I've been with the office, which was starting in 2003, we ran those ads in English. We've always had to run them in Navajo because we're under the minority language provision of the Voting Rights Act. But I think able to reach people in the rural areas of our county, radio was really the best way to do it. So we were very excited about that. We've also received funding in the past and also in 2020 from the Help America Vote Act from the federal government. And most of that money is coming in for specific purposes, such as the security grant that we received. That we had to use to increase security. And so what we did is we had the Department of Homeland Security has people that came and they reviewed our locations and gave us ideas on how we needed to improve things. Like in our lobby area at our main office, it's a big glass. And they said, well, somebody could drive right through there. And so we bought big boulders. Thank goodness we have a lot of boulders up here in Flagstaff. And put those up, just as a barrier, things we didn't even think about. We also have installed camera systems for video surveillance throughout our facilities. We use money to buy a special software that will help us with cybersecurity through our IT network. And we now have keypad entry to keep track of who's coming and going into areas of our facilities. Now, one of the things with funding and the difference between the Help America Vote Act funds and the CTCL funds was CTCL just said, spend it the way you think it will help you the most. The Help America Vote Act funds is usually a specific funds that is like for security, and it's to buy equipment. So, you know, we can buy keypad or electronic poll books. Well, electronic poll books don't program themselves and maintain themselves and do the testing in that. So you need people for that. So that's why the CTCL, we used it for hiring people to do what needed to be done. And since I've been involved in election administration, I've seen that the majority of the funds that come from the federal government, such as the funds that came originally when the Help America Vote Act was passed, was to buy voting equipment. So we got rid of our punch card system and went to digital optical scan equipment and touch screen for accessible voting. Again, we bought the equipment, but we needed a warehouse. We needed staff that could take care of that equipment. And so it's always a blessing to get some money, but we don't always get money where it's needed for election administration. And an example, just at the state level, there's a bill, HB 2493, to create an election integrity fund. Well, again, that's to be used for security. And it does say in that you could have staffing. Well, we've gotten a lot of money from the federal government for security. Security is, I don't need funds for security. What would really help is if the state would give us funds to pay for the state voter registration system, which is called AVID. The counties have to pay for the system, and coming up with that money makes it difficult. So I've been involved with a group that kind of came out of the CTCL group, which is working at the national level for to create or ask Congress for $20 billion over the next 10 years for an election infrastructure initiative. And this would be money that would come directly to the local offices instead of going through the state. That was another advantage of the CTCL. When it goes through the state, even in the Secretary of State or through the governor's office, there's usually politics will come into play, unfortunately. And it makes it difficult for the money to come. Like there was money available going through the governor's office in 2020, but it was so burdensome to have to do the weekly reports and everything to get that money. We didn't apply for it. So the Center for Technology and Civic Life is a private organization. It's a nonprofit. It's, from what I understand, most of it is funded through Mark Zuckerberg and his wife. And that became a political issue because people that don't like Mark Zuckerberg then felt like the money was tainted or was used to be part of what I call the big lie, which is that there was all this fraud in it through the elections. And the elections in 2020 were not secure and accurate. And so the legislature passed a bill that we can no longer accept money, grant money, except from governmental entities, such as the federal government or the state government. And the center, when I've talked to people there, they really felt like, they stepped up and did this nationwide. I mean, they gave out millions of dollars across the country to local election offices. And they said it's disturbing that we were relying on a private organization, even though it's nonpartisan and a nonprofit, to fund our elections. Elections are integral to our democracy. And that's why we feel that the infrastructure of our country should include elections. So that's why we're working on that. I want to thank the commission. You have been such an important partner to the election officials across Arizona. You have helped us in so many ways, and through radio ads, or like I know you helped us with our voter guide, which is we mail out prior to every state primary election. And we do that to all registered voters to help us clean our list. It's required under the National Voter Registration Act. And I mean, there's so many things that the commission has helped us with through your mission of educating voters. And like I said, thank you so much. It's been, I don't know what we would do without you, truthfully, right now. So I'd be willing to ask any questions. You're probably always hearing money, money, money. That's what people need. But we've done some things that I know we're very proud of across the state, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to do things, and also in partnership with your commission. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's a lot of information. I appreciate that. I did have one question. And I think I thought I heard you say that there were some state funds available, but the reporting requirements were so onerous that you had decided not to apply for them, or your office did. And I guess, did I hear that right? And two, if I did, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was through the, because of the pandemic, it was part of the CARES Act.
Okay.
Right, in regards to funding, and that money had to go to the government, from what I understand, to be doled out. And the governor's office put in place some requirements that made it like a weekly reporting, that made it difficult when you're in a big crunch for the elections. Usually what we do when it goes through the Secretary of State's office is we submit our grant application, and then after the elections, we submit a report of what we've spent it on and how, and that. But this was a little bit more burdensome of reporting type things to go through.
Yeah, and I think you said you got a security grant. Was that through the federal government, or was that a state fund?
That was the federal government. It was through the Help America Vote Act. And that came through the Secretary of State's office.
Okay.
Then we applied to them, and they then gave us the money.
Great. Okay. Do any other commissioners have any other questions for Ms. Hansen while she's here?
I do.
Go ahead, Commissioner Chan.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Patty. It's so good to see you. And you are so informative as always. And I love hearing exactly how many years you've been doing this, because it just, solidifies everything for me about why you're such an expert and do such an incredible job. I did have a few questions, and you touched on these issues, and so did the chairman, but What do you think? Do you have any idea what the likelihood is of getting federal funding that your group is asking for? And can you reiterate for me how much money you're asking for? And you said over 10 years, I think.
Yes, it is 20 billion with a B. I know it's kind of, but it's nationwide and it's over 10 years. And I think the last I read, there was 80 co-sponsors on the bill. I know Representative O'Halloran, our representative, has signed on to it. And I think a couple other Arizona representatives have. It depends, anything getting through the US Congress is difficult, but there does seem to be a strong support. But they did some national polling. And in fact, I'm going to be sitting in on a meeting next week, the results of the polling, but they're finding strong bipartisan support for funding elections. And so I'm feeling optimistic about it right now. We'll see. So, and it's good to see you too.
Thank you.
Yeah, and congrats on your new position. I look forward to, hopefully I won't have to bother you too much in that role.
You're never a bother. Happy to talk to you anytime. I didn't realize it was a bill already. So to me, that's already huge progress. I thought it was more of an idea that you guys were pursuing. So that's fantastic news. You kind of touched on this as well, but how receptive are state legislators to any additional funding for elections and, voter education and that sort of thing? If you can kind of talk to us about that.
Well, in the security area, I think there is support. Like there was money attached to a bill that would have required us to use a certain type of paper with holographic images and a lot of different things in it. There was money attached, if that had passed, would have been attached to that we could use to offset, because the cost was going to triple or, really increase if we had to go to that kind of paper. So when it's things dealing with preventing fraud, it seems like there is support now in the legislature. But I really do feel that that is an area where we are really being funded well at the national level through the Help America Vote Act. So the pandemic, I think, if anything could come out of such a tragic thing, did open up some of the doors for us to get some funding in regards to, personal safety, such as the sneeze guards and things like that. So I think we're doing pretty good there. But otherwise, I don't see too much interest in providing money to the counties, like for staffing issues. Staffing, I think you'll find across the state, is the hardest thing for us. Because as things become more technical, you need staff with special skills and training and expertise. It's not like we could hire just now, go to a temp service and hire anybody to come in and do a lot of these things. So, and we ran background checks on people too, and that's a little bit extra cost there. So
I think, one thing you mentioned, and I did hear you say this in your original discussion that you gave us, is that, our state legislature seems willing to provide money for election security. And frankly, I would agree with what I think I heard you say, which is that I think our election security is already top notch. And that's not to say that there can't be improvements ever, but I think that, part of the problem with the big lie was convincing people that there was actual fraud that was a problem, when in reality, that is not a problem in any way, shape, or form. We all know that sometimes people have bad intent and get through with voting maybe in more than one state, for example, but that's very, very rare. So I appreciate what you've told us. I did have a question, and this is about voters. Do you think there's anything that you can recommend for voters as far as how we communicate to voters, about how they can stay involved in these processes? I mean, I think that's kind of always the rub for us, right? Getting voters engaged and maintaining that. If you have anything to offer on that, I'd love to hear it.
I think continuing, the education part, I know through the years, one of the most frustrating things for me is when people ask, where can I find information on candidates that's unbiased? And, you're fulfilling that role in a lot of ways, but as much as you can expand that out, I always refer people to your website and to the debates and that. But I know working with Gina has been very, very helpful. And now that I'm thinking, I should probably get a list when you have those debates in place to have it posted on our website too, and so that we can get that information out more. But yeah, the education part, I think, and I know people are wanting to be more involved and learn about elections. And I've thought about up here doing what I call kind of an election college, kind of a take on the electoral college, but during the off years to do an education kind of program of the basics of how elections work. Because a lot of people don't realize all of the steps we go through to keep things secure, such as following the ballot. I know Yavapai has a good program on that, where, when the early ballot comes in, we count them all, we record the count. When we're processing, we make sure that we've processed all of them. And, there's lots of things involved that I think, maybe something that the commission may want to look at, just teaching basic elections administration basics. Sorry, I'll give you more work. But, but partner with the local. And two, it's confusing. I always know when something goes wrong, or there's an issue, not going wrong, but an issue in Maricopa County, because my phones start ringing off the hook that they think it's here. And it's like, no, that's not our county. But, how it's hard right now. And another problem we have that I don't know how to solve is at NAU, they sign people up for the for early ballots. Students never pick them up. We get trays of ballots back after the election that were never picked up by the voters. And so, how do you engage and reach people that a generation that doesn't even use snail mail at all? And it's like, oh, I have a post office box. I didn't know I had a post office box. So things like that, I guess. I'm sorry, I'll just ramble on, but
Thank you.
Question.
Thank you.
Patty, I had a question as far as you talked about administration issues, and Mike had mentioned earlier about this bill that's proposed to count all the ballots in 24 hours. Can you kind of speak to that? Is that possible to do? Or what type of challenges would that present to Coconino County to try to do that? Can you maybe shed some light on that? Or share your thoughts with us on that type of provision?
I don't know how we would do it in Coconino County. It's like I mentioned earlier, for poll workers, they're working 5 a.m. until about 9 p.m. We're going to ask them to stay I would say it's going to be another 5 or 6 hours to count a general election ballot. There are so many errors in hand counting, and to get things, you can't just do the marks for the ballots. I've seen people in that during our post-election hand audit, you have to do stacking method, which is you separate it. So you do, I guess, governor, and then do that race. And then you'd have to do attorney general, and then that race. And it, contrary to what people believe, we don't have people coming out of the woodwork that want to work for us as poll workers. And I just can't even imagine Maricopa County, how you could do almost 2 million or 1.5 million ballots by hand. I have seen, when I worked in Nebraska, there was still several small counties that tabulated by hand their votes. And I would see mistakes. Numbers would be recorded, numbers transposed. And I don't know. If you want accuracy, you do not do it by hand. And yeah, I'd like to give the legislator a big stack of like 500 ballots that are marked and ask him to tabulate it by hand to see what is involved. It's easy if we only had one question on the ballot, maybe, one race, but I just don't see how it can be done. I really don't.
Well, we saw how long it took for the ninjas to do 2 races. So.
Oh, true.
All right. Any other commissioners have any questions for Ms. Hansen?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Kimball.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kimball.
Ms. Hansen, thank you very much for your information. I learned a lot from what you said. I just had one question. You talked about using funds for security, for ballot drop boxes. If you were to get some funds without onerous restrictions placed on them, what's your greatest funding need now? You mentioned people. Is that it, or are there some physical things that you need other than that?
I would say right now it's people. We need to really beef up our training programs. What some people call fraud is human mistakes. I don't know anything else where we have made an election system so complicated for our poll workers that we expect them to work this long day after having only 2 to 4 hours at the most of training and have it be error-free. You've got provisional ballots, you've got, touchscreen voting equipment, you have electronic poll books, it's ID checking. And I probably shouldn't say this, but I always say it after every election. It's a miracle that it works as well as it does. And it's because our poll workers are so dedicated. They do want to do it correctly, but we just, I don't believe, supply them enough to make it so they can actually learn all of that in detail. And with money, I think we could expand that education program for training them and giving them the supplies. I don't know about you, but if I'm showing a new software program and it 4 weeks before I'm going to even touch the equipment, and I will probably not remember everything they taught me 4 weeks prior. So how can we improve that they know how to use everything and follow the proper, procedures? So that's why a lot of election officials want to go to voting by mail, because voting by mail takes the poll workers out of it, the process, and you have trained staff that is actually doing things. And it's much easier for us to train our staff. We can say you're going to have to be trained for, a week. You can't tell a coworker they have to attend a 5-day training session unless you're going to pay them a lot of money. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Payton, do you have any questions?
Well, I guess I just have some observations, and it gratifies me to know that our education programs have been so beneficial in ways that I would have thought, that it could be so helpful to the recorders and it just is gratifying to know that we have such an impact. Sometimes, we are in these meetings and we think that we're doing good, but this just points out how well we have improved things. So thank you for your for being such a professional, and hopefully we can help in other ways, that we can think of other ways. And if you can think of ways that we can help that we're not doing, let the staff know. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Payton. Anyone else? Commissioner Titler, do you have any questions or comments? I see you're on mute. Okay. Well, Patti, I really want to thank you for joining us. I learned a lot this morning. It's very helpful. Unless anyone else has any further questions, we are going to move on to our next agenda item. But I guess last chance for anyone for more questions. Okay. Thank you so much, Patti. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Take care.
You too. Okay, now we are going to move on to agenda item number 5, which is discussion and possible action on CB 2021-007328, the Power of Fives LLC v. Sloan et al. For some of my other commissioners, staff has scheduled this agenda item in order to discuss a request from Mr. Sloan and his attorney related to a contract action between Mr. Sloan and a limited liability company called the Power of Fives, who we discussed before. I'm going to ask Tom to give us a little bit of background on this item, and then I will call on Mr. Sloan or his counsel. Tom, let's hope for the best here.
Good morning, Chairman Meyer and members of the board. Before Tom begins, I wanted to let you know that this is Monique Cody. I'm the board's independent advisor on previous matters I have advised you. And on this particular agenda item, today I'm your independent advisor. If you have any legal questions at all or want to go into executive session, I will be your attorney, not Kara, on this agenda item only. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cody. Thank you so much. Tom?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, briefly to give you the background here, as you know, and we did provide notice to TPOF to make sure that they were aware of this hearing. We have an ongoing enforcement related action with this TPOF limited liability company, and we have ongoing litigation in Superior Court with this TPOF company. Mr. Sloan was a client of TPOF in the 2020 election. You may recall we had an enforcement action related to him. We did a repayment order, and then in December we resolved the enforcement action as it relates to Mr. Sloan. Mr. Sloan has had a contractual relationship of some kind with the Power of Fives company. They went through a arbitration procedure that then was converted into that subsequently has turned into a judgment that Mr. Sloan is
seeking to appeal from. By way of background, when this arbitration arose, we were subpoenaed. I was subpoenaed to testify at that, and with the help of Kara and the Attorney General's office, we had that subpoena quashed. The issue that was presented to us and that we brought before you out of an effort to ensure that there is transparency in this and to ensure that we don't have any additional extraneous issues is whether or not the commission would file some form of amicus brief or something in this appeal from this judgment related to the whether or not, because there was a enforcement action brought in this, that there is a public policy argument for why this judgment shouldn't be enforced. I would leave it there. Before I hand it back to you, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to suggest, if there's anything I've missed here, Kara is essentially the staff attorney, for lack of a better way of putting it, on this item. So if there's anything I've missed that I need to I need to defer to her on any blanks I need to fill in before. So, Mr. Chairman, if you want to ask her that before you hand it off, that might be a good idea. And I hope everybody heard me. I'm trying the phone here now.
No, we did hear you, and I appreciate that, Tom. And I don't know, Ms. Cody, do you have anything to add to what Tom said there, or should I turn this over to Mr. Sloan or Mr. Stanley, I believe is his counsel?
I believe Mr. Collins wanted to verify with Kara as the staff attorney for Clean Elections whether she had anything to add to his summary before you turn it over. So I would offer Kara Carlson the opportunity right now if she wants to add anything.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I think Mr. Collins hit all of the key procedural points about where the various parties stand and where we stand in regards to all the various parties and the different suits and enforcement actions that are either pending or have been resolved. So unless you have any specific questions or any commissioners have specific questions on that before you proceed to opening it up to anyone else, I'm available to answer them.
Yeah, I don't have any additional questions. Any of the other commissioners have any questions? Okay, so now is the time for a statement from Mr. Stanley or Mr. Sloan?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Stanley, Mr. Sloan, I leave it to whichever one of you wants to address the commission.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to have, I'll speak briefly and then I'll introduce Mr. Stanley, who is representing me in this matter. As the commission knows, the background on this has been going on for approximately 2 years now. Mr. Stanley is here specifically to speak to the legal arguments with regards to the public policy question that's being put in front of the court. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Stanley.
This is Brian Stanley speaking for Eric Sloan. Eric Sloan has appealed from the judgment in the Superior Court case. So it's now going to be in the Court of Appeals. The fact that there's an investigation or a charge, a complaint actually still pending, to which the Power of Fives has responded with a lawsuit, keys up the fact that there is a controversy there, a controversy that basically revolves around the legality of the arrangements that Power of Fives was making with prospective clean elections candidates, and I assume is still trying to make with, or will in the future continue to try to make. And I don't need to go into the issues that the Clean Elections Commission has with the Power of Fives contract, because that's already the subject of the lawsuit. But we're talking about what the commission might be interested in doing with respect to the pending appeal. So let me just start out with a brief overview of the amicus curiae process. Amicus curiae, as you probably all know, means friend of the court. And it's a long tradition that appellate courts, in the old days, they would take the initiative and spontaneously reach out to especially interested public bodies to get perspective, whether it would be a private trade association or a government agency. The court would say, well, there's a public policy issue here. Let's hear from this body of interest, because an appellate decision is going to be reported. It's going to be the law that all the judges have to follow. And the positions of the parties who are simply litigating, generally speaking, about money, don't necessarily reflect all of the policy considerations that the new law made by a decision in the case might affect. So that was the origin. It's become more formalized, of course, over the years. In Arizona, all state agencies have a right to present themselves as amici curiae, friends of the court. And other agents, other party, individuals, agencies, groups, associations have to apply to the court in each case and say, we are whoever we represent or whatever interest we represent, and we think the court should have the benefit of our perspective on these issues. And then the court decides whether it thinks that's appropriate or not. But as a state agency, you don't have to take that step. I think it's appropriate for the commission to allow its attorneys to monitor what's going on in the appeal, what the issues in Mr. Sloan's appeal are, and how they affect the perspective of the commission as it involves the same issues that it's litigating with Power of Fives in the action. I mean, they're unrelated actions, except that the policy considerations that the commission thinks are important may be affected by a decision in Mr. Sloan's case. And the commission has the right to get its perspective before the appellate court for that reason. So I think it's appropriate for the commission to authorize its staff attorneys to monitor and to make recommendations as to whether the commission should file an amicus brief. The brief of an amicus doesn't have to 100% support the position of any party in the appeal. It can just be limited to saying, well, we are such and such a commission and our interest is, in clean elections, and here's our perspective on this particular legal point or points that are at issue in the appeal. The amici get to see all the briefs. They're kind of the last party to be heard when amici are involved in an appeal, because their briefs aren't due until after the last briefs of the parties themselves. So I'm estimating that it will be something in the neighborhood of 90 days, probably maybe a little bit more, that a decision to present an amicus brief or not would have to be made. So what I think the commission can do at this point is authorize the staff attorneys to monitor the case, the appeal for that purpose, and to make a recommendation after the briefs are filed, the parties' briefs are filed, as to whether the commission wants to submit an amicus brief. And I have to defer to the knowledge of the staff attorneys in terms of whether they would also need to coordinate with the Attorney General's office in terms of the actual preparation of a brief. But for the staff to be authorized to initiate those communications if necessary, or to prepare a recommendation as to the presentation of an amicus brief when the time comes.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add something here.
Mr. Sloan, go ahead.
As I've said before, I am not an attorney, and I'm at quite the disadvantage because there are a lot of attorneys on this call. But the primary issue here is whether or not this arbitrator and her ignoring of the public policy and the policy of the Clean Elections Commission will be codified and would be equivalently would be case law, right? That it would basically create a pathway for this to continue, not only to happen in this situation, but to continue to happen in other situations moving forward. And so, as we've talked about before, the commission has made it very clear that the public policy has been violated in this situation. There was a repayment order because of the violation. I've taken responsibility for the violation. We have a company that continues to want to violate the public policy and the will of this commission, and this appeal is going to be on a variety of issues, but specifically to the public policy arguments with regards to how it is applied in this case and in future cases. Thank you.
Mr. Stanley, do you have anything to add after Mr. Sloan made those comments?
Yes. The implications as to future cases is going to be there, especially if the Court of Appeals opinion is reported. It used to be when I was first called to the bar, sometime before the flood, courts were hostile to arbitration, especially where public policy issues were involved. That has changed completely during my career to a place where the courts are extremely deferential to arbitration. Basically it takes something off of their plate and leaves it in the private party's lap. And in my opinion, that pendulum has swung too far, especially where public policy issues are concerned. It's very common for companies of various kinds to have arbitration clauses in their contracts. If you are going to be involved with their services, you have to, in effect, sign their form that says you can't go to court if there's a dispute. It's going to go to arbitration. That kind of a clause was in the Power of Fives contract that they presented to Mr. Sloan, and that's why a court has not actually been heard on the whole issue of the legality of the Power of Fives contract. So it's a problem for the appeal that courts have adopted such a deferential attitude toward the arbitrator. In effect, the court could say, well, public policy can be disregarded by the arbitrator, and sorry, the courts can't do anything about it. And then as long as you have operators like Power of Five that have arbitration clauses in their form contracts, you're never going to get a court to say whether their contract was legal or not legal. It'll always be arbitrators. But anyway, that's one of the issues involved in Mr. Sloan's appeal. But it's also a matter of concern, I would think, to the commission, if there's ever going to be a chance to address some of these concerns in a judicial context. The only way for the commission to have its perspective heard may be through a amicus brief in a case of this kind.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stanley. I don't have any questions for Mr. Stanley or Mr. Sloan. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any questions? Okay. All right, hearing none. I guess I would suggest that we do a very brief executive session to speak with Ms. Cody on this request. We don't need a motion for that. I think we can I can call that, correct, Tom?
I'm sorry, executive
Chairman?
session does require a motion, and it requires a majority vote to go into executive session.
Okay, I had that wrong. I apologize. Okay.
You can adjourn it. You adjourn it
I
yourself.
can adjourn it. I just can't start it. Great. Thank you.
Correct.
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I move that we go into executive session to discuss this, as you said.
Okay. All right. I have a motion. Is there a second?
Commissioner Kimball, second.
All right. We have a motion.
I'm sorry, I just want to be clear that the motion is to go into executive session to receive legal advice on this matter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. So now we'll take a vote. We're going to do the roll call vote. Ms. Chan.
I vote aye.
Mr. Kimball.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mr. Titla.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. So that motion passes 5-0. We're going to go into executive session. It's been a while since we've done this on virtually. Do we end the meeting? How do we do this?
So the live stream will continue, and those that are to participate in the executive session will receive an invitation to join a breakout room. So just to confirm, I have Monique, the commissioners, our court reporter, and Tom Collins. Is there anyone else that should be joining the executive session?
Tom should not be joining the executive session.
Thank you. Okay, so then everyone, as I mentioned, will receive an invitation to join the breakout. The live stream will continue on Zoom for those staying in this Zoom meeting. And once those return from the breakout room, we can go ahead and continue with the meeting.
So do we need to leave this meeting before we join the breakout?
No, so those invited will see an invitation to a breakout room. So I will open that right now.
All right, we are back. Is everyone else still there?
We are here.
And do I need to reopen the meeting, or are we just,
You could announce the time. The meeting, we're out of executive session and the meeting is reconvening at 11:06 a.m.
Okay, so this is Damian Meyer. We have ended our executive session. It's now 11:07 on my watch, and we are back in general session. We did have executive session and obtain advice from counsel. I just wanted to comment briefly on the request, and that is, I think the commission has made its position clear on our record regarding our position as to the dispute between Mr. Sloan and Party of Five. There are ongoing proceedings between the commission and Party of Five. And at this time, I don't think it's appropriate for the commission or in the interest of the commission to consider filing an amicus brief. So at this time, I don't think this is something that the commission should get involved in. That's my position, and I open it up to the other commissioners if they want to question me on that or have offer their own opinions. But that's where I am, and if no one else has anything to offer, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just make a brief comment and then, as you mentioned, let the other commissioners, if they wish to make a statement. I would echo what you said. My concerns today are twofold. I don't want to give Mr. Sloan and his counsel, false hope of how I'm viewing things today, because, if we continued this, I think there might be a belief on their part that we would, and I don't know how the vote's going to go, but for myself, I don't think I would support an amicus brief filing going forward based on what we've heard today. That's something that is a result of thinking about the commission's interests, the already pending cases that we've had and have going on. And just the fact that it's not something that would be consistent with what the commission has done in the past. To my experience being on the commission, I think it would be unusual for an amicus brief, and I just don't believe it's our role to do so, even though I appreciate the arguments that Mr. Sloan and Mr. Stanley have made today. But I believe that perhaps our transcripts could be of help to them in their case. I mean, it is all public record, what has occurred. And if they wish to use that in their arguments, certainly Power of Fives may wish to use it in their arguments. I don't know, but that's my feeling as of right now.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chan. Any other commissioners have any comments, or can I entertain a motion?
If there's no comments, I will make a motion
Go ahead,
that
Commissioner Chan.
based on the current information that we have, not to file an amicus brief in this matter.
Okay, just so I understand the motion, your motion is based upon the current information before the commission. You move that the commission not file an amicus brief in this pending litigation. Sloan be party of, sorry.
Power of Fives.
Power of Five, thank you. Do I understand your motion correctly?
That is exactly what I wish to convey.
Okay, and just to clear that motion up, I'm sorry. The motion is, Amy, that based on the information available now, you move that the commission not file an amicus brief in the action of the Power of Fives LLC versus Sloan. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Kimball. I second the motion.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and then we have a second. So we'll go ahead and vote, and I'm going to call the roll. I'm going to start with Commissioner Chan.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Kimball.
Aye.
Commissioner Payton,
Aye.
and Commissioner Titler.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So we have the motion carries 5-0. So with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which we've already, I think, sort of discussed a bit, but that is discussion and possible action on 2022 legislative bills on the topics of elections, voting, administration, and campaign finance. Today is actually the 74th day of the legislative session. You may have read recently that a number of election bills have stalled in the state Senate, but there are still a number of measures out there that raise concerns. Staff has a brief update. And if there are any questions, we'll ask those after the update. And I apologize for my eagerness earlier to jump ahead on this topic, but please enlighten us, staff members.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. As Mr. Chairman, as you noted, there are a number of bills that. And I think that Julian's done a good job of compiling. I think there were something like 14 bills that failed on the floor of the Senate in the last 2 weeks, many of which were of I think, significant concern to the commission, certainly to the election administrators and county recorders of the state. That said, I wanted to highlight a couple of bills specifically for you. One, I think Mike mentioned, and we can circle back to, is this is a bill that's now offered as a striker in the Senate. This was what I think, well, I don't know who did it, but dubbed the Kraken Bill. This is this sort of notion that the sponsor said his intention was to bring elections back to 1958, which for those of us who, have a history, know a little bit about history, that is before, basically the Voting Rights Act. And that's what the implication of that statement is, clearly and obviously. That bill, however, as County Recorder Hansen articulated, in addition to raising a new number of obvious civil rights issues and issues of federal law, also just doesn't work. It is literally unworkable. When the county association's lobbyist Jen Marson testified on it this week, she basically told the Senate that it would be impossible, and it would be impossible, to count votes by hand at the precinct level in 24 hours. I mean, it's monumentally stupid. My hope is that, knowing that this would destroy the entire election process, that the Senate will not pass it out, and that certainly the governor wouldn't sign it. But we are keeping an eye on it. Obviously, it was a bill that was dead in the House and got revived. The other bill I think is worth pointing out, and it's timely, and I do have a request about it. There's a bill called House Bill 2492. House Bill 2492 does a number of things related to proof of citizenship. By way of background, in 2004, voters passed at the ballot a referendum placed on the ballot by the legislature that created a requirement for a voter ID provision in our state law, and additionally created what is referred to as documentary proof of citizenship requirement for voters seeking to register to vote. Just as a side note, Commissioner Chan, when she was the election director, and I, when I was attorney at the Attorney General's office, were both involved in litigating this issue for years. The bill 2492 seeks to revamp this provisions, particularly around the citizenship proof issue, and it has some really deeply problematic components. Whereas in 2004, when voters passed this initiative, they expressly determined that people who had received their, who had established, who had essentially a driver's license on file from 1996 forward or backwards, and were already registered, did not need to provide this additional proof of citizenship. The way that this bill is crafted, it says that notwithstanding any other law, in order for a person to vote in the presidential election, who has not yet provided this, they will have to provide it. The issue there is, number one, it expressly disenfranchises people who are qualified to vote under federal law, which has been established by a case that, we lost in 2013. And secondly, it would, by notwithstanding that, it would have, I think, an obvious impact on what voters enacted in 2004, which brings in a Voter Protection Act issue. A third point I'm concerned about is it's very confusing. From a voter education perspective, given all the other things we're dealing with, this would inject a whole new level of uncertainty in education around who's qualified to vote, who is not, and it would center that issue around the presidential election, which is just the potential there for downside is quite significant. So that's the upshot of that bill. I can tell you that the county association has weighed in against the bill. I know that the county recorder, some of the county recorders are contemplating and will ask for a veto from Governor Ducey, and the Secretary of State's office or Secretary of State herself rather, has called on the governor to veto this bill. Because it implicates the Voter Protection Act, the fundamental right to vote, and because it triggers a real serious voter education, voter confusion, systemic risk issue, I actually think in this particular case, we may, I think it would be worth communicating to the governor's office our concerns about the bill. The fact that it got out of the Senate, understandably, that makes this not a bipartisan situation. This was a party line vote. However, the legal and systemic risk issues here are significant, and it's very hard for me to sit here and say, in view of the bipartisan county association position, that it's not worth communicating to the governor's office in some way on behalf of the commission.
Commissioner Chan.
I just wanted to mention, Tom, just to kind of put additional, more personal perspective on it. I mean, I've been registered to vote in Arizona since I was 18, and that is well before the requirement for proof of citizenship. It was when we just swore that we're citizens, and it's under penalty of perjury. So I'm one of the people affected by this bill, and I imagine quite a few of us others on this Zoom are probably affected by this bill. To me, that's a huge disenfranchisement hurdle for folks registering, and in addition to the other issues that are associated with it. So I just wanted to make sure that's kind of out there, that we all understand how far this reaches.
Sure. So any other questions or comments from other commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Kimball.
Tom, I want to make sure I understand where this bill is. You said it passed the Senate. Is that right? The paperwork you sent us said it passed the House.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kimball, thank you. Yes, it passed the Senate literally yesterday. So it is now going to be transmitted to the governor. So yeah, that was breaking news that
okay.
It happened about 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon.
Someone asking what number it is. It's H2492. And one other thing, is there an exception for people who have the new driver's license with the gold star, which I guess you have to show proof of citizenship to get, which allows you to get on an airplane?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kimball, I do not think there's an exception anywhere. In fact, the way I read the bill and is that you would still have to present that. So in other words, the bill is, as I read it, is not super clear on what additional procedures might be in place. For example, it expands and requires prosecutions of folks who fill out this paperwork wrong and who turn out to be citizens. But it doesn't really articulate very well what precisely would be looked at. There's another bill that's already on the ballot that has to do a little bit more with changing the technicalities of showing ID. But this bill is in that sense, I don't think it creates those exceptions at all. If anything, what it does is it eliminates standing exceptions that exist. So while I certainly believe that it is likely that under the bill, if someone presented that information to the county recorder in order to register, the notwithstanding clause on the bill, in my view, makes it difficult to avoid at least having to have a new presentment potentially of that information. Now, it may be, and I'm not enough of nuance into what the election administrator's process will be if this were to get signed to, for example, there are various databases against which the counties can and do compare information that they receive from voters. But so that's where it really becomes a problem of uncertainty. In other words, the plain language of the bill says, notwithstanding any other law before the next presidential election, everyone must have complied with a section of statute they did not previously have to comply with. And so that to me, to your point, really just raises any number of permutations of how that would be confusing for no real gain, if you will, in terms of the legitimacy of our voter rolls.
So just to be clear, so this is now being transmitted to the governor, and what are you asking or suggesting that we do? Lobby the governor not to sign it?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Kimball, yes, I think that it, I would, essentially we would communicate with the governor's general counsel's office and say, look, these are serious issues, and this bill is not this bill is essentially not ready for prime time. I think we do have, and as I mentioned at the last meeting, we have expressed authority to make recommendations on policy issues. Not everybody has that at the state level. And so it seems to me that this falls within the area in which it certainly couldn't hurt. I don't think that this necessarily needs to be I'm not talking necessarily about a press release or anything like that per se. I think it's simply a matter of saying to the governor's office, look, we have experience in voter education, we have experience in the VPA, and we have, in this case, we have experience with the administration of the citizen-proof citizenship law in Arizona over the course of the last, 18 years, which is a shocking amount of time. And so, given that perspective, this bill, it would be better for the governor's office to consider vetoing this bill than it would be for the governor's office to let the bill go into law and have the courts sort it out. The provisions of the bill, I should say, and have been, that I've talked about here, the legislature heard from their own attorneys that there are serious constitutional preemption and other problems with the bill. They know that. Having worked through this process on any number of bills is, it is often easier to simply let the courts sort it out, right? That often becomes a rationale for maybe letting something happen that wouldn't otherwise. In this particular case, I think that it puts the courts in a particularly terrible position. And it's not necessarily a position that we want the courts to be put in, because I can just tell you from a narrative perspective, I would anticipate some people who support this law taking the judiciary to task for, in their view, not requiring people to prove citizenship, and therefore creating falsely creating an impression that non-citizens will be voting in the 2024 presidential election. That to me is a significant enough confusion issue that letting the court sort it out is not a cost-free proposition for the election system, even if it's a relatively low-cost solution to the political actors in this case.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Commissioner Chan.
Tom, I would support sending a veto letter to the governor about this bill. I think it's important. So.
Anyone else have any comments?
This is Commissioner Payton. This is one item that I think is it's a cookie thing, and I think we should submit a letter to the governor.
Okay. Commissioner Titla, any comments? Okay. All right. So Tom, you need
I agree with the comments that the commissioners have made regarding this bill. Sounds like a crazy bill, and I don't see how seemingly intelligent people in the legislature would come up with this kind of kooky ideas and bills. It just, I don't know what to say. I'm just flabbergasted. And so I will leave it at that, but I agree with you all. Thank you.
Commissioner Kimball? No comment? Okay.
No, nothing else. Thank you.
Right. So Tom, do you need a motion, or just this is just enough to just ask you to do this, correct? Because I'm with Commissioner Chan and Commissioner Titla, and I believe Commissioner Kimball as well. Just to confirm, and I see him nodding.
Yeah.
We would like you to send the letter to the governor's office, or take what lobbying measures I guess you see fit on this.
Sure. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I mean, my view is the record is clear, and there's not a requirement to vote on this. So. Okay.
Okay. So that's agenda 6. Are there any other bills we want to discuss on agenda item 6?
Could I just make one other comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think it would be helpful to point out in a letter or whatever form of communication this takes that the commission unanimously supports you in this. Commissioners of both political parties and no political parties support you in this.
Mr. Chairman, I think there was a question. I mean, again, I think we can say that based on this record.
Yeah.
Without being, there is, and before Mr. Chairman, before we move on, there's one other bill I want to highlight that I think is important. I apologize. There's just one more.
No, that's okay.
Bill. But I don't know. I want to make sure I answer Commissioner Kimball's question.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay. The other bill that's out there, and we were tracking it yesterday, and we're not sure exactly where it's going, but it's a Senate concurrent resolution that would again make a number of changes to early voting, limiting early voting, and create. It's called SCR 1032. The reason why that bill matters, and we will see where it goes, but I just wanted to put it on your radar, is it requires it would go to the voters, and it would require, among other things, the Clean Elections Commission to essentially pick up the tab for all costs associated with eliminating early voting. in the state. So it's we'll see if that gets any legs. It's got a lot of real serious technical problems like the other bills we've talked about here. It's not, it's something we're tracking and I want you all to be aware of. It's not a bill that would go through the governor, and that's just an important thing for you all to be aware of because of it being a referendum. So that was the other bill I want to make sure that we got mentioned.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that bill? Or you need directive from us on that, Tom? Okay.
No, Mr. Chairman, not at this time.
Any other questions or comments on agenda item 6 before we move on? Okay. Agenda item number 7. Discussion and possible action on equal electronic system for candidate petitions, candidate qualifications for the ballot, and qualifying contributions for participating candidates. As expected, last week, the Secretary of State's office took the equal electronic petition system offline for legislative candidates to allow the updating of districts based on changes to the voter registration system because of redistricting. Staff, you have a quick update on where things stand. Tom, please fill us in.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. Just real briefly, I touched on this in the Executive Director's report portion of the meeting. The issues surrounding how the equal system, so in 2011, the legislature authorized and the Secretary of State office started to implement a way for people to sign petitions for candidates and to give qualifying contributions to clean candidates through an electronic portal called eQual. In December, when we learned that the redistricting would have some complicating factors because of the way that eQual pings off of this program called Avid. There's 2 computer programs at issue. The eQual system, which then is locked into Avid, which is the voter registration system. The reason it's locked into the voter registration system is that what eQual does is it pings a voter's information off the voter registration system in order to determine if that voter is in fact eligible to sign a petition. With legislative districts, obviously that's more complicated than statewide because of the issues with, and so this year being redistricting year, there's some interaction there. In December, we learned that would have to be taken, that those changes that require action at the county level would require the eQual system to come offline. The Secretary's office, starting in December, then started communicating to candidates about that. We've tried to amplify that to candidates. I know, I saw, and I think, and I assume this was widespread, although that's certainly anecdotally, efforts by campaign parties and others to ensure folks understood that this deadline was approaching. And so the Secretary's office, communicated, I want to say, I think 11 times or something like that. I can't remember the precise number, with candidates. This did cause, concern, I think, at the outset because, it was not communicated early enough, perhaps, than it should have been. I certainly think that, but I also, we made clear particularly to the press, although this never made it into any story, that we never wanted to exaggerate the scope of the problem. And now that we are past the date for the switchover, I'm hopeful, and I said to the press again, although this did make the paper, that I'm hopeful that this will not be a big deal. We have not received, to my knowledge, any complaints ourselves. This situation sort of became more tenuous or problematic. Were the interactions with the Attorney General's office, election integrity unit, and the Secretary's office. We talked about the last couple of months. First, the Attorney General's office sent a letter to the Secretary's office threatening some form of prosecution. The Secretary's office then sued the Attorney General's office. That case is still pending. However, and then the Attorney General's office last week began soliciting complaints from anyone who was not able to use the eQual system that wanted to. No, I've not seen any update yet about whether or not they have received any complaints, but again, we have not. We don't administrate the eQual system, don't get me wrong. We're not the right place to make complaints, but we are a place where people complain. And so we hope at this point that this will be behind us. We don't have a firm date yet as to when the system may come back online for qualifying contributions. We know candidates have been, because the window is open, candidates have been filing their petitions. The time to qualify for clean elections funding is a little longer than the time to qualify for the ballot. So as we get updated about that, we will communicate that or attempt to amplify that, the Secretary's communications on that issue. That concludes my report on this. If Mr. Chairman, if anyone has any questions about that.
So Tom, are we still sort of in a observation mode on this? Then we just sit back and go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yes, my view at this point is that, look, we've communicated with the, I should say, I have communicated with the county, with some of the bigger counties. I've communicated with Yavapai, I've communicated with Maricopa. I have not seen any evidence that there is anything that is going to hang up candidates in some way that we are not anticipating. So, and certainly given that the window or the system came offline and we have not heard anything, really makes me hope that this is not a big, just becomes not a big deal. So I certainly don't, I don't think at this point, given the Attorney General's actions, that it would benefit us or anyone at this point to try to create any further consternation about this. Our main point is just to try to make sure folks have the information from their county recorder or the Secretary's office they need, and then if something comes up where it's always possible, but there's nothing we would need to do affirmatively at this point that I'm aware of.
Any questions or comments for Tom on this issue? Okay. Thank you, Tom. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is public comment. This is the time for consideration of comments and suggestions from the public. Action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date or responding to criticism. Does any member of the public wish to make comments at this time? You may also send comments to the commission by mail or email at ccec@azcleanelections.gov. Is there anyone on the line for public comment? I don't see anyone, but anyone there, please let me know. Okay, so no one here for public comment. Agenda item number 9 is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I motion to adjourn.
We have thank you, Commissioner Titla. We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Commissioner Chan, thank you. We have a motion to adjourn. It's been seconded. I'm going to call the roll. Commissioner Kimball.
Aye.
Commissioner Chan.
Aye.
Commissioner Payton.
Aye.
Commissioner Titla. Commissioner Titla.
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye as well. So the motion.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner Titla. I got you. I vote aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.